Welcome to the Denton Vibe with Diva Girl Ellie, powered in part by Classic of Denton. The views and opinions expressed by the show hosts and their guests are those of the show host and guests, and not necessarily those of the sponsors, DentonRadio.com, or the Denton Convention and Visitors Bureau. For more information, visit the Policies and Procedures page at DentonRadio.com.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on the Denton Vibe with Diva Girl Ellie here at Denton Radio. We are here on the square, and we have Emily and Adam here today in the studio with us. They're going to share some of their talent with us. We're going to get to know them. We're going to get to hear all about their works and their projects. And thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Of course. I'm so excited. Emily, you're here for the first time with us, and Adam is a return veteran.
It's good to be back.
I'm just excited to be here for the first time.
I know. I'm so excited to have you. So I want to get to know you guys, share you guys with everybody out there. And some people may already know you guys, but I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with you guys. Go ahead.
Well, I am, I guess, kind of new to Denton, so this is all really fun for me because I only moved here about 2 years ago to start pursuing my master's degrees at TWU because I eventually, for some reason or another, want to be a high school English teacher or teach writing too. But I've been writing for professionally since, 2013. I have 4 books of poetry out. Through Weasel Press, which is a really awesome indie press based out of Houston, Texas. I have a 5th coming out this summer, which is exciting.
I bet.
It's really fun. It's called Looking For, and it's actually a collection of blackout poems made out of people's Tinder bios.
Nice.
So if you are on Tinder in Denton, you may be in a book. You just don't know it.
That is hilarious.
It's really fun. Like, I have friends all over the world who will send me screenshots of Tinder bios just so I can make poems out of them, which is exciting.
That's cool. It's like crowdsourcing.
Yeah, it really is. I have a whole note in the book of these came from all of these different locations, and these are all kinds of people who I got, but I don't know who they actually are, so I can't give them credit.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. That is so crazy that you would take that idea and create with it and then publish something. I mean, that's pretty wild.
It's fun. I've actually created an Instagram account for it. It's
nice.
at Tinder Blackouts because people get really into seeing them online. And I've only ever made them on my phone, so I have an actual I just use my phone editing app and do it on there, so it stays on the phone the entire time and never leaves, just like Tinder never leaves your phone. Even get in a relationship, break up 6 months later, back on Tinder. It never truly goes away.
Well, that's pretty interesting. I'm going to have to check it out because I've never actually been on Tinder. I don't even know what it looks like. So it would be kind of cool to see what everybody always talks about and see.
It's a strange place.
It's a strange
place. It's a strange space in the universe.
Well, I would imagine that's what we all thought at one point or another about the beginnings of social media. MySpace being the one that I started out with. But so what about you, Adam? What's going on with you?
I came to Denton for jazz school, and I spent 3 years in the jazz program. Then I got injured, and so I had to sort of seek another option as I was doing transcription with drums, because really when you can't play, all you can do is sort of transcribe the music. And so I started even doing that. I just kind of started reading poets and getting into poetry because of Tom Waits. I knew so much and could play so much of his music, but I didn't really know exactly why he was writing what he was writing. And then I discovered modernism, and that helped me realize this symbolist tradition. And I went through all these all the mythologies again, and I just kind of found myself pathologically doing it. Just sort of writing because
you kept going back to it.
Yeah. And I published my first poem with the North Texas Review at UNT.
Nice.
And then I've published with the Dentonite and the Spiderweb Salon that even Emily, I think you said you were part of, right? And there's going to be an anthology out, I think. Did you turn 7? Awesome.
Yep.
I did too.
So all 3 of us are going to be in the anthology.
I'm really excited too.
Oh, Spiderweb. But other than that, I play in bands around town. I play in a couple new ones. Danielle Grubb, which is like an R&B pop artist.
Oh, very cool.
And she's really one of my favorite people to play with.
Very nice.
And then some introspective folk pop called Jay Allert. And Joel is the leader of that band, and he's a great writer. And I always forget what I'm playing with.
Don't forget mine.
Oh, yeah, and then we're in Hot Mess. Ellie and the Hot Mess.
It's my favorite band, honestly.
Thank you. I know Jake gets tired of hearing about it, but it is a real band. Adam is here to attest to that. And now I have a real fan.
There you go. That's all you need. You need a fan
it's
and
real.
a band. You're set.
I'm going for the gold, guys. We're going to make it. Anyway, so we are here to hear some of your poetry, and there's so much going on right now in Denton with poetry, spoken word, and it's growing. It's rapidly growing because it's always been there. So it's always awesome when you have people sharing that. It could be fun, it could be emotional, it could be a lot of things, and more than anything, I think it's a bonding experience. It is therapeutic at times. So I would just love to hear your pieces that you brought in tonight, and just kind of just get into that and just melt in the words with you. So I'll let you guys decide who's going first.
I can read first since you started.
Do it. I was debating, like, do I need a rock, paper, scissors? Do? Like, let's do this.
All right. I'll probably start with Warren, Through the Warren, which is something I submitted for the Spiderweb anthology.
Nice. We get a sneak peek. Yeah. I'm so excited for that. Yeah, I can't wait.
It's going to be really cool.
I think so.
So this is Through the Warren, and I wrote this for Clyde Warren Park as a criticism. Criticism is not hate, but curiosity that follows you to Roatone. Like a fever, the warm, sweet green of Honduras sags above the Warren estate. Fresh-cut palms, stubborn undergrowth that clung to their trunks, burned with the old plantations. Here, your wind farm stretches like a tiger swan hunting the Harafuna winds. These white turbines rise and filibuster against that ancestral tongue that bursts from the volcano of St. Vincent and breaks against this red-bricked hospital in Trujillo. Or it swells, re-enters the black earth deposits underneath a rain-soaked veranda, as industry, careers ponderous in the bay, those Vanderbilt ships carrying off produce, children's clothes. As a mother brushes the labor and strangle from her daughter's hair, she wonders what you do not own, what you do not export. There are no fields for work, except their bodies men use as land titles. Her people have never called this work. Perhaps from this hospital window, with the sun laying in her eyes, her anger wanes pink the tides and froths the glassy sands. As the greyhounds bark, to the cadence of hammers, the catrachos retired from deepening the wells, and a young woman fetches fresh water for Tuchafas leaning in her window. A polite interpellation, and the smog of the cassava chip factory covers the markets in long shadows. Tourists, with their William Walker eyes, appraise and filibuster the indigenous from behind a water bottle. When she was first sold, her daughter already knew the Warren men, many depositors, transfer partners, but her skin, an acquisition of equity, you said must grow until she dies. Hasn't she already, with the birth of your son, a girl, a mother, underneath an excursion park?
Nice. Thank you.
For sure.
Like giving little silent snaps.
I like that.
Yeah,
The
it was
silent
gorgeous.
snap. That was very colorful.
Mhm.
Like I felt like I was there somewhere else.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to do like a kind of realist, kind of bucolic poem, sort of
What about
walking
it?
through the Warren.
Yeah.
It worked well.
I'm like, I need a vacation.
Follow that. Goodness.
And so we continue.
Alright.
Yeah,
No, go ahead.
yeah. I was like, because I kind of thought it was cool to do like a share, like a back and forth, but
Hey, I'm on
Sure,
for
let's
it.
do it. All right, I'm about it. So this is I did National Poetry Writing Month last month, where I wrote a poem every single day of April.
Did you do it?
I did. I actually succeeded.
That's awesome.
And there was a prompt. It was something along the lines of, where did you come from? And it made me think a lot about growing up with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually a poem that came out of that, and it's entitled 5 Memories of Growing Up with My Father. 1. Sitting in a bright blue pickup truck parked under a sweet gum tree for shade. 'Cause the inside gets so hot, the seats stick to my thighs, attaching to them like a second polyester skin. And Marty Robbins in the cassette deck replaying the same song over and over again. And rusted pliers and bits of PVC pipe fill the floor space and clang against my feet as I swing my legs back and forth and back and forth, just too short for them to rest on the black plastic floor mats. And windows cranked down by hand with fingers stained a dusty red from spending all day playing magician outside, carving sigils in Carolina clay. 2. Digimon on a Saturday morning. We crawled into the king-size bed in his room, played with the ceramic fox and leprechaun statues my mother bought him, avoiding the sharp, broken edges, and watched the square TV in the corner just far enough away that my eyes made all the shapes and colors a little bit blurry. I cannot remember what we had for breakfast, only the words to the theme song. 3. Holding a flashlight over a hole in the ground, watching Gray Sledge crawl through a pipe we'd taken the top off of. I never took to plumbing, only firefly hunting in the customer's yard. 4. No one else helps him cook on Thanksgiving. We make the turkey, disassemble its body, and refill it with pre-made stuffing, changing what we place inside its chest cavity each year, even once the bodies of other birds. He lets me make the green bean casserole, sprinkle fried onion bits across the top. We watch the parade and football, television always on, make gravy from a jar, and eat at least 2 pies, 2 different flavors. I'm partial to pumpkin. Once we even had key lime. Each year we break the wishbone. He always lets me make the wish. 5. I am 23 and eating rosemary and sea salt bread from the food pantry. It's a week past its expiration date, but he always said those dates were arbitrary and kept cans in his pantry 10 years past theirs just in case, never knowing when the world would end. He grows a garden in the backyard and a plot as long as I am tall, but never any herbs, never any rosemary, only tall corn that peeks over the edges of the fence, and tomato plants and purple bell peppers I don't think actually exist. I call him with my mouth full. We still talk on the phone every week.
Very cool.
I love that. I
That
love,
was really
especially
nice.
number 4.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Very nice. Okay. Well, we'll keep going.
Yeah, I'm about it.
This was another. Not all of these are criticisms, but this one is a criticism of the Orange Revolution, because I saw it's a fascist right-wing government that was instituted in Ukraine, and Netflix even sort of like made this apologist documentary for it, and it's quite horrible. I mean, they're naming Liberators streets after like right-wing nationalists, and even in the East, where there's like mostly Russian speakers, they are in a sort of civil war against the Ukrainian sort of Nazis. So this is Hero City after the Orange Revolution. It is easy to forget why they came here on Independence Square. The new crusaders removed St. George's head and replaced it with a red-black poppy and flag, which the foreign journalists admired, surrounded by militia and swastikas. The romantic nationalists deface old liberators' graves, revise each name. An American documentarian, his face as white, amended as a history textbook, points his camera at Stepan Bandera like a poem, hero of Ukraine. Or in Donbass, where the military marches, the coal hills, split open by Air Force and bombs, surrender the liberators' bones, the hills swelling again with their children. It is easy to forget why we came here, to forget the schools closing, the city barricading itself in, the snipers on the bridge, the structural reforms. The IMF shut off the heat, the mines have no electricity, and outside the police station, the people paint their passports orange as the human rights organizers gaze from inside the banks. We are refugees in our own city, to austerity selling tourists vodka at the border, our homes mortared in the afterbirth of a nation, this blood and soil slewing west, fascism reincarnates.
Thank you.
Wow, very nice. I'm really digging your imagery usage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like, I'm about it. Like, debating now, like, what to read. So, I went to, oh gosh, what is it, the Lake Ray Roberts?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Mhm.
I'm still learning, like,
Yeah.
everything around here. It's kind of a struggle. And I'm still not understanding why everybody is, like, okay with driving 30 minutes every day to somewhere. Like,
That's DFW.
it just, like, the time space doesn't make sense to me. But my friend, when I was out there, was telling me about the whippoorwill, which I've never heard before. And so this is actually a poem I wrote while at a campfire listening to this bird. And I don't know, I just really, it was a weird moment for me that was really kind of serendipitous of sorts.
Nice.
So this poem is entitled, When the Whippoorwill Sings and the Full Moon Rises, I Realize I Have Always Known You. I lean against your legs while I watch the poem drafts I've been scribbling all evening dance in the yellow campfire flame. While I drink the instant coffee we made on a camp stove and flavored with leftover creamer cups we found forgotten in the car from our last road trip. While I dig my toes into the cool mud from yesterday's thunderstorm, while wearing the too big jean jacket you stole from your father, while the fish splash against the bank, looking for crickets and fireflies, while I wonder if I have known you before, because there's an echo of a memory here of the two of us in the soil of these woods, intertwined in all these miles of roots, like a poem I forgot I wrote.
Yes.
Nice.
I
I
love
like it.
It's
Yeah.
so, like, I love the intimation, especially.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a fun one to kind of weave into each other, all these different little moments that you have, and like, what are you doing while you're doing something else? It's ongoing constantly.
Very neat. Thank you. You got another one, Ed?
Yeah, I guess I'll read a shorter one. I have an incomplete series.
I have some of those too. It's always interesting when I hear other poets or go see other people performing. I just want to go back home and write at that point.
Right. Me too. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, I could like this and this. And I'm like,
So it's always interesting to me to hear other people, and it just sparks inspiration pretty much. So thank you for inspiring me.
For sure. I don't know how I should program. I don't know. I'm thinking about that. So I guess this one, I was sort of trying to figure out like the connection that, I don't know, white men sort of make a spectacle of their suicides and sort of like hold us prisoner to this spectacle. And so this was like a short one about like a 32-year-old man who hijacked a airplane that was, it was just an airplane he was working on, but it wasn't his. And he like stopped the entire air traffic, and then he ended up plowing into the Puget Sound with the plane. But it's a quick one. You called me from the cockpit with the confidence of a child in your voice. You never really knew what you were going to be. 15,000 feet of solitude. You had control of the uncontrollable, and it was easy. Then autonomous act that obscene begins to talk with me. You wanted to see the fruited plains, the Olympic mountains white with the exhibition of suicide, free, falling into the Puget Sound, alone yet not alone. We are forced to emergency.
that one's really good. I think that might be my favorite that you've read all night. Like, you've got like that sound in the first with like from the cockpit with the confidence of a child. Like that C there is like, that's on point.
Oh, thank you.
It's always interesting to see what comes out of everybody's got different thoughts and thought process, but sometimes I'm like, where did they get this from? It's like, what were they thinking to pull that out of your head, and it's really, I think, a dissection of just, the world around you and just thoughts
Absolutely.
in general, that anything thought-provoking, and it just leads into, I wouldn't have been able to write that because it just so eloquently put for such a topic, it's like,
yeah, I
nice,
think
props.
I read a lot of nonfiction that's like political analysis or like material analysis of certain geopolitics. I don't know. I'm very my boyfriend Clint. He is very much into like all of communism. So I learned a lot through reading a lot of his books. I just get everything is political. I mean, there literally is no way to depoliticize something. It's always political, and so I think even the slightest behavior is sort of pathologically political.
How much I've written this semester for my grad program, just using that phrase of like the personal is political, everything is political. Actually, I gave a talk at TWU. Not this past Friday, but I think the Friday before, within like this, in May 3rd. So I can't keep track of dates. Time is hard. About how the personal is political for queer poets specifically, and like choosing to prescribe a sexuality or gender identity to a poet based on the speaker of the poem can like really put queer poets in an uncomfy space because you're outing them without their permission. So like I definitely can see that and feel that.
Well, very cool. I know there's so many sides and aspects to poetry, and it just always amazes me to hear everybody's.
It's cool what comes out. I get to work with students on like writing their poetry through like I do the Duke Tip program, and I work with high school students, and it's always just amazing to see what they come up with, and it's beautiful.
So what ages do you work with as far as your teaching?
So I've worked starting from like I've taught 3rd grade, 5th grade, middle school, and then high school. Predominantly middle and high school in the summers, and teaching creative writing though.
Nice.
It's a lot of fun.
For real, that's beautiful work.
And do you do any of that? Well, I'm sure it's local, but do you have any programs that people can get involved with that?
Not so much yet. That is on the docket of sorts. I've been working on some proposals for things, but long term, I really want to help Denton get a better like creative writing program for youth set up because it's so important, and like
I believe so as well. Yeah, I think so too. So I would love to talk to you about that topic off the grid. So.
Oh yes, I'm excited. No, it's like it makes such a difference to my kids. Like I've had 3 students who've contacted me recently who they have gone or going into school now, going into college. I had them when they were middle schoolers or early high school. One of them just got a full ride scholarship to Rice University to study creative writing in English.
That's awesome.
And she was like, you showed me that, poetry doesn't have to be your rhyming, traditional. She called it old white dude poetry. But like, and it really doesn't. Poetry is such a magical thing that you can create. One of the first things I do with every one of my creative writing classes is have them define what poetry is. And then we look at all of these examples of things. Like I have them look at this book called Milk and Vine, which is milk and honey, but it's written in the same style as Milk and Honey, but it's all vines. And then like we're like, well, why isn't this a poem? Why is it? We look at blackout poetry, all these things, and they get to define for themselves what it is. And I think as poets, we have to choose to define what poetry is for us every day.
Yeah, I think for me, when I started writing more consistently, I'm like, I don't feel like my poetry needs to be in a rhyming format. I need to step out of that because that's not how I want to communicate. And so when I did, I felt like almost like a second voice or a second wind of a voice for poetry, because boxing yourself into that rhyme, it's very, people who do it, props, but then speaking as we would have a conversation, even in our own mind, and to share that with people is very, very refreshing and eye-opening for so many topics and stuff. So, I'm just like, learning as much as I can.
No, and it's fun for me because I do so much stuff with like blackout poetry, and it's like, well, is that even poetry if you're just grabbing a few words off a page and throwing it together? But at the same time, why isn't it?
Right.
Exactly.
No, and it also has like, it's like immediately, it's necessarily having a conversation with the culture too. I mean, it being a blackout of Tinder too. But I always try to like either quote or interact with like people's work I love the most. Like Adrienne Rich is definitely like by far like I can't read anything. If I like read her in public, I would just be bawling still.
I would too, honestly. There's so many poets like that.
But yeah, no, I'm always trying to have a conversation with people's work so that there's something external about it, and that I like to approach the sort of like confessional medium, but in like a twisted way where you are somebody who you are not actually. Maybe you're trying to imagine that you're something else, somebody else. Like, I guess, for instance, like the Observer in Honduras. But
that's pretty cool.
Interesting, because I do so differently in mine. Like, I just like open myself up to all the readers or to whoever's listening or anything like that as myself.
Right.
So it's like I use the confessional frame in a very different manner, which is always cool to see how people do that differently.
Absolutely. I still think it's very important to have that conversational tone, because it immediately allows people to like talk about it, or at least like maybe you're the interlocutor of who like you're addressing the poem to.
For sure.
It's very interesting to see what kind of gaps you actually bridge with people that you wouldn't normally communicate with, whatever that means to whoever's speaking. I'm a firm believer that sometimes conversations that are hard to have in everyday life tend to get bridged with writing and poetry, especially when you perform it live, because when you perform it live, like I always say, it's not watching TV and you can become, immune to the emotion of a human. Whereas when you're sitting in the audience, you feel as a human feels. And so you cannot deny the emotions that you're watching. And if you guys were there, I think you guys were, I think you performed.
Yeah, because I'm like, I know what you're talking about. Radio Poets Live with the spider web.
Yeah, so being in that room and having that experience was unreal. It was unreal. And so you cannot trade that, or you can't. It's just a raw feeling that even I was not expecting. I was like, whew. I walked out of there and I was like, okay, that kind of altered me. Because, I get up, I do poetry too, and I perform, and I get nervous. I still get nervous. It's the different side or the flip side of me, because I'm used to being in here or producing, with Lost Poet Lounge and stuff. But doing that, it's a different feeling. But then to dig deep into such a topic of, raw, vulnerable feelings.
Absolutely.
And especially something about, so serious about mental health awareness and whatnot, and the issues that come up with that. It just literally blindsided me performing. So it's just so interesting to see what happens. Performing the piece and hearing you read it is one thing, but when you're up there in front of such a large audience and it's raw, ooh, give me the chills. So, do you guys have anything else?
Yeah, I have another one to read. It's actually kind of fits with what we're talking about, that like kind of raw opening up sense. So I have a brother who I haven't seen since like 2011 or so. And my goal in life is one day to find him again. And so he was like a baby when I saw him last. And this is a poem I actually wrote about him in National Poetry Writing Month. And I think the prompt was something like to show sadness and simplicity. So this poem is entitled, I Cannot Remember the Sound of My Brother's Laughter. It's disappeared from my memory, like the sea receding from the sand. But sometimes I think I hear it while in line at Walmart buying cookies and wine. I ask everyone around me their name, and I look at their hands. But it's never him, a six-fingered boy now almost 10 years older. If I found him, I wonder if he would remember my voice from when I told him once late at night how the universe came to be when neither of us could sleep.
Wow.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. You have anything else, Adam, before?
Yeah, I'll read this short series. This was, I guess I was just kind of playing with, I just read a book of Rilke's collected poems, and I couldn't stop using the same darn images.
I love it. It gets in your brain. It really does. Like, you just get obsessed sometimes.
For real. And so this is an incomplete series. I got a bunch of other... I usually write in fragments on tiny little scraps of paper, and I have a whole box of just crud that I
the popcorn's ready.
But anyway, this is Quiet Friend Out at the Edge of the Night. Quiet friend, out at the edge of the night, I feel your breath make passageways of my fear of you. Let this be a candle that runs upon its flame towards the crossroads of the dark impossible, the spring and flare before you, or scatter into the youthful burning of the moon, my body a symptom of its burning. When will I return to you, the meaning that wonders equally of you? Could we then bend the distances of our words' end, and together leap into the upper limits of the night sky, there re-enter the spaces of a new death that only we can share in?
Nice.
I really like that one.
Very cool.
I'm excited to see that one grow further. Like you said, you're still working on parts of it. Like, it works as it is right now really well. But that's awesome.
So I do have a question about published works. Obviously, you guys both have done that. And so how do you guys pick what you're going to publish?
It's a joke of like, I'm like, I never know. And it's always like, whatever I have done, kind of a thing.
For real. Usually deadlines help me to like cram everything together and be like, I have to make cuts, or I have to like put things together, and I have to actually do stuff. So I do like having the whole, like the anxiety of needing it to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And since I have so many fragments, I'm just kind of like editing and reading at the same time. I read like obsessionally when I'm trying to edit, which is like kind of antithetical to actually editing, because then you start reading and then you're like, I actually re-editing to write and to edit. But editing is a really tough process. It's, I think, the hardest thing about writing, because there's so many different ways to do it, and that, I mean, it's the most important part of publishing, I think.
Takes so long. Like, I've had poems that I've come back to years after and edit them, and
really,
it's just like, it's this constant ongoing. I had a poem that was actually published, and then I was submitting to a fellowship contest or something, and I like went and looked at that poem, and then I like edited it completely and changed the title of it, and I emailed the editor because I know her, and I was like, hey, I did them, just to let you know, I'm like submitting this for this thing. I changed the title. It's still the same poem, I guess, maybe not really. I don't know, but I did that. She's like, oh, that's so cool, I love it even more. And I'm like, thanks. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah, it's always like you have to resign yourself to it. Will never be completed. It always has to be this sort of incomplete that even if it's published, you'll probably return 10 years later to it and
constantly.
be like, I gotta fix that.
That's how I look. I'm like, I don't even want to look at like my books that I put, like my first book that I published. I'm like, it doesn't exist in my brain, because I'm like, if I see it, then I'm going to want to fix it. I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with it. It exists in the time that it was published as it was published, and that's totally cool and awesome.
And it shows your progressive growth, so
exactly.
It's your milestone.
It's funny. I had a friend who told me that was the favorite book I've ever published, a favorite thing I've ever published, and I'm like, why? It sucks.
It's a part of you, and you just keep going, and obviously there's growth and inspiration, and I'm interested to see those books, so I'll have to hit you up for those. Yeah, definitely.
The first one was called Toast is Just Bread That Put Up a Fight.
Oh, nice. That's pretty cool. So where can we find your works of art or your poetry?
Well, I play live with Daniel Grubb and Jay Allert, and I'm doing... it'll be in the anthology of the Spiderweb, where alongside y'all.
Yay!
And the Denton night, I think they're about to
close
them down.
Yeah, they did.
So I don't know if they'll keep it up or anything, but
let's hope. So you can pull from the archives. I know I have some stuff that I wrote on there too.
Yeah, and I remember publishing alongside you in that first batch. And then North Texas Review, It's there on the website.
Okay.
And that is institutionalized, so I think that'll be
Yeah.
be there for a while.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Emily?
So I've been published in like three countries, and so my work is all over the internet. I actually just like got Google certified.
Nice.
Like I'm like, oh my gosh.
Touch her, Adam. She's legit.
But I also have like a link on like Poets and Writers magazine and
Nice.
stuff. But mostly you can just go to my website, which is authoremilyramser.wordpress.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I have links to a bunch of stuff there, and I need to update it, but I'm lazy. So I'm getting there on it. But yeah, I have stuff all over the place. It's kind of
Very
fun.
cool. That is neat. Okay, so do you guys have anything going on in the near future, just in case, if you want to put that out there? If not, no biggie.
I guess I'm reading with Isabel
Nice.
at I don't know where it is. I think it's a private event, so maybe I shouldn't have said it.
Hey, well, you have fun at that private event, okay?
Without all of us,
Thanks.
whatever.
Well, I
Can somebody
guess it's
videotape it for us?
It's a house show, so you don't want too many people showing up.
Yeah.
But
Get the address and we'll all be there. No, I'm
Yeah, it's a-
kidding.
Casually put it online for all to see. It's fine, right?
But she talked about it actually at the KXT. I think
Mhm.
she did a panel,
Mhm.
and I didn't actually get to see it, but I saw Skylar post a picture about it. But yeah, it's something about like exploring the identity of the self, and
Oh, nice.
Um,
Cool. No, yeah, I've seen something about that.
yeah, I'll definitely send you an invite.
Heck yeah.
And you.
I was like, wait a minute. I fell
We can be buddies.
Hey. Well, very cool. Okay, well, you have fun at that private event. We're going to give him a hard time about that. Whatever. He must be VIP.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, so I'm so glad you guys came here tonight and sat down and shared a part of you with us. And so thank you so much. And as always, an open door policy with my guests. I always get an attachment with my guests. And I'm like, yeah, I stalk y'all. Anyways.
It's okay, we'll be besties. We'll go to private events without him.
And we're going to post selfies, Adam. And we're going to tag you in
I'm
them.
gonna be bitter and jealous.
And then you're going to write poetry about it.
There we go. It all circles back.
There you go.
Just make sure to dedicate your book to us.
Exactly.
Your inspiration.
Man, he fueled the fire, didn't he?
Oh, it's okay.
But thank you guys so much for joining us tonight on the Denton Vibe with Diva Girl Ellie. Thank you for always supporting the local arts and poetry and all that good stuff that we offer here in Denton.
Well, thank
We'll
you
see
for
next
tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. We want to thank our partners and sponsors who made this show possible. And now stick around for a word from all of us here at Discover Denton.